Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Cup Editorials. My name is Jillian Robinson. I'm the Associate Artistic Producer here at Cup of Hemlock Theatre, and I am joined by the fabulous Mackenzie Horner, one of our artistic producers. Hey, Mac, how you doing?
Oh, Jill, don't cry for me, Argentina. We're coming in and we're going to be talking about something that I think people of the Lloyd Webber Tim Rice group will be very happy about.
Yes, and I'll add in there a little snap click because today we are talking about Evita the musical, sort of like a versus Diana the musical. We're going to unpack both pieces and we're going to compare and contrast, both of these pieces that have titular ladies behind those of our viewers watching the YouTube clip behind Mac there. We have our Diana and our Evita. So Mac, this is kind of like your brain baby. I wonder if this can be something for editorials. And I really do think there is some things to discuss. So I'll kind of lead us through. But before we do that, we have to talk about what is in our cup. So Mac, what are you sipping on?
Oh, I got my usual Crystal Light, passion fruit, grapefruit drink there, the usual.
Nice.
Nothing too fancy or special. Just some flavored water, basically.
Love that.
You? What is your ensemble, Jill?
It's funny. I kind of am just wearing the ensemble I had for one of my Joe jobs today, but it is kind of like color schemey / fashiony. I've got like pearl earrings, this like tank top that's got some polka dot and lace. And then just like a little like green blouse thing over top. So
I was expecting a full Evita ball gown on you, Jill.
Oh, no.
Or like the Evita hair just all pulled back.
Wow. Yeah, no, not today. It's funny enough, though. I did go through my closet today to like try on old dresses and new dresses. Again, not episode related, but must have been on the brain.
You were having your rainbow high moment.
There it is. Exactly. Yeah. Okay, so speaking of rainbows, I've got my like colorful flowery cup.
Yes, just like the scrim in Diana that we see.
Yes.
That she has the flower scrim.
And we've got some iced coffee, just leftover iced coffee. But I was also a bit chilly and wanted like a cozy vibe, so I also have a tea going as well in our cup.
Very good, yes.
And I have my water. So there's just a melange of drinks here happening.
You have the plethora of beverages.
Exactly. Great. So let's dive in. So I guess to kick everything off, let's share our general thoughts about the portrayals of Princess Diana and Eva Peron in their respective musicals. And then, we'll talk about the musicals themselves. But Mac, just kick us off.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I actually just rewatched Diana the Musical on the weekend because we did talk about Diana the Musical in its own episode. It got its own snap click based episode. So I hadn't watched it since. And I've listened to Evita a number of times. It's my favorite Lloyd Webber, Tim Rice collab musical. After that was on our first season 1 episodes on before the Downbeat was doing Evita. I think it was like episode 4. It was a very early on episode because it's one of my all-time favorites, as well as it is for Autumn too. But the way these two characters are written, so kind of what started all this is we watched Diana as like a movie night fun thing for our golden trio. And I came away with that going, oh my goodness, is there ever parallels to Evita in this show? I mean, both have like the one name title, Diana, Evita. Both are blondes. Both are kind of like first ladies of a country where they are like top of the media pile. They are right there growing and then unfortunately they both die well before their times. Both were, Evita was like in her early 30s. I think Diana was the same way. I think she was early 30s as well. So like they die around the same time. Both are very politically minded and are the power drivers in the seats compared to their partners. So there's a lot of dynamics at play. But what I will say is I think what makes Evita the stronger character for me is the layers to her. Because, I mean, people who don't know your history, the Evita and Juan Perón were not democratic leaders. They were authoritarians. They gave refuge to Nazis after World War II. They did shut down anti-Peronista presses, and they did do that. And we do see that where like Evita is power hungry. They don't shy away that like basically when you get to the end of Act 1 with A New Argentina and you have Evita in bed talking with Perón, and it's almost kind of like a villain, like Lady M and Macbeth conversation where it's like, he's talking about, the dice are rolling, the knives are out, and she's like, this is crazy defeatist talk, like we can take the power because we have the unions on our side, right? And it's like, that's what makes her such a fascinating character is, she gets called up for not doing enough, so then she creates the Evita Fund, which is a great fund because there are many people who say we learned and got proper education through the Evita Fund, but also there was a lot of money that went missing in the process, like she did do a lot of good, but she also was a very, very, this musical portrays her as a very power hungry individual who was actively campaigning to be the vice president, basically meaning that her and Perón would have complete control over the government in all its power. But then you go to the other end with Diana, and it's a nice portrayal, but as we talked about in our Diana review, it doesn't sink deep enough into who Diana was. They kind of keep her as, once again, I saw something on Instagram which really kind of put Diana into perspective for me is someone had a picture of Camilla in a bathing suit, like older Camilla in her one piece, and Diana from the 90s in her one piece. And they basically were saying, like, look at the old boorish queen we have. We should have had Diana. And they obviously called her some very derogatory names, Camilla, but then somebody in the comment posted, like, you can't compare them. Like, she died in the prime of her life. Of course, she's going to look way better than, a 60-year-old woman in a bathing suit.
Yeah, like, that doesn't make any sense.
Right? And Diana, in the musical, very much sides with Diana making Charles and Camilla almost downright villains of this story. And keep Diana very wholesome, very innocent. Because when, we talk about this in our Diana review, which is, Diana was no idiot. Like, she knew the power of the media. And she knew what she wanted to do and wanted to say. Like, she wasn't some innocent person. Like, watching the revenge dress scene and watching her kind of wallow, and then it's her butler who has to kind of convince her to go out. Reading some historical accounts, that wasn't the case. Diana actively knew the interview was happening, and she actively planned to steal the spotlight from Charles. And I think if we had gone a bit more of the gray world with Diana, like, that would have made her such a more wholesome character for audiences, because we are, as human beings, very gray. Something I liked about The Crown's latest season 5, is that they call out Diana going, no, she was very mature in like the Wars of the Waleses too. Philip made it very clear about how do you play the game in the palace. And Diana went, no, I got to write a book. I'm going to, do the interview and drop it unintentionally, but, on the anniversary of Elizabeth and Philip. Like, once again, it was the thing of, she didn't do these things just out of naivety. She knew what a book was going to do. She knew what she was saying in the book. Because once again, she was coming from a very emotional place of, she's going through this messy separation. Charles cheated on her. And basically, it's funny, I was in the Stratford bookshop because they just did Casey and Diana this past season. And so they have that book that like Diana, her story. And I was flipping through it, reading some passages, and it's like, this is clearly a woman going through an emotional crisis. And she is letting out all that pain and anger in these recordings that then got transcribed into a book. Like, and you watch the Martin Bashir interview, and now we've come out and learned that, Martin Bashir really did manipulate her and played on her fears of being spied upon. And that's really kind of why she spoke out when she did. But they don't get into any of that, of like, what's going on. It was more like, she's the hurt woman, so she's doing this to reclaim herself. Like, no. There's more to that story than the simple thing of Diana's the jaded wife and her husband's cheating on her. Like, there's so much more there that should have been done to give her a more complex depth, just like Evita is. Like Evita comes in that first scene with Magaldi and basically says, no, you slept with me, and guess what? I'm getting the hell out of here. Like, she takes the reins and is driving in this. And Diana just didn't have that same energy,
Well, here's what I think is like a main reason why I actually think these musicals are very different. I think like aesthetically, like you're saying, and with the title or whatever, your brain can pair them together. But I think if we are talking about them as characters, they're very different women. Like Ava is power hungry and knows what she wants and bulldozes from the very beginning. And that's her persona. Whereas Diana, like she has all of that. We found out obviously through like shows and movies and books. She's not really portrayed that way. But Ava has to climb for her status. Diana is given it. So both of these women, I think, are just coming into their power or their manipulation. It's placed upon them differently. And I think and also in another thing that makes them very different is media. So Ava Perón, that story, like mid 1900s versus Diana's life, which was in the 90s mostly, where exponentially what the idea of what media is, oh my God, like video kills the radio star, right? Like we got, it was like as frenzy and like giddy people were with the media, to have Diana be this figure to sort of like place upon the media or the media placed upon her. Like, I think the spotlights for these women were very different as well. Like we have Ava does her tours around the world as well, but there's less of like exposure, exposure meaning like through like a camera lens of her than there is of Diana. Like, right. Like even Diana when she was alive, and then especially Diana now with the way that people are like obsessed with the royal family. They just, I think like these women too were like, they're bred differently, like, and then also their legacy has been like very, very different. And then in the musicals themselves, like we'll get into this as we kind of talk further, but I think through like Ava, we're following Ava's story in Evita, but very much, and again, we'll get into the nitty gritty of this, but like very much the overlying theme of what that musical is, like the power of the people, right? It's very much like, and again, we'll get into it, but there's things that are theatrical things that are happening in that musical that support the people, literally the actors on stage, but also like the theme of the people, right? Whereas the sort of structure of like Diana the musical is there, to me, like, and we talked about this on the review as well, is like there seems to be like and even going back and reading like a little synopsis of like, right, it does seem very like microscopic of like, oh, Diana and Charles's relationship, and then Charles and Camille's affair, and then Diana's affair with James, and all of these like these little gossipy, singular, like individualistic themes. And then the snap click of like each scene kind of doesn't necessarily have this like connective tissue that I like felt with Evita. And again, I think that has to do with like, like sussing out like, what is this piece? Why is this piece? Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of just like a landing pad.
I like it.
I know.
It's a good job.
I know our questions are going to take us. So let's just keep going.
Let's go. Let's keep going.
Yeah. So we talked about how both musicals kind of take us through this character's life and different structures can be like compared, contrast, but yet Evita has more acclaim than Diana's sort of mixed negative reviews.
Mixed negative is a nice way to say it.
Yeah. And it closed, not long after it opened. So what were some things that maybe Diana's team did wrong, or why maybe this musical didn't really make the mark or hit the mark?
I mean, plot and character wise, it's tricky because, I mean, we'll get into this in a future question, but, and we talked a bit about this in the Diana review, but I think they just took on too much. I think this particular story they were wanting to tell about this fated love triangle of Charles, Diana, Camilla needed a smaller, more focused storyline. Because like we get a whole bunch of other things, or it's like Diana doing her work with the AIDS epidemic. We got her doing talking more about just there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on.
Definitely seemed like vignette-y. Vignettes
vignette-y.
Of her.
Yeah. And I mean, Evita's the same way, where if you read the libretto, it's a lot of Che comes out, he says a bit of he gives a bit of setup. There's a scene where, Evita comes in, but you're right, there is more connective tissue. Like just that first sequence right after the Requiem and the Oh What a Circus part. So you get right into, Evita growing up and meeting Magaldi, and then there's right into What's New Buenos Aires, right into Good Night and Thank You. Like they clip through a lot of plot in those songs. And I think that's what was missing here is, you're right, there wasn't really connective tissue, and there should have been something that connected them. And there should be more songs that flowed from one sequence to another. Like the closest they ever got was with Diana's meeting the Welsh people on the line, and the turning of them, and then the flipping back and forth with Charles and Camilla. Those little moments there are like, okay, you're trying for it, but we need more of this all the way through.
Yeah, I felt that too. And especially, we haven't mentioned this yet, but the most recent sort of Evita staged production that Mac and I exposed ourselves to was the 2012 Broadway revival with
Elena Rogers, Michael Severus, and Ricky Martin.
Right, which Patti LuPone is above your shoulder there, but Elena Rogers,
the OG,
is the Evita we will kind of be thinking of when we break down. I just found too, to think, I go back to helping with this connective tissue, there was especially in this 2012 production, such attention to, and that's the thing is they took time in Evita for moments, but the time was paid off, or the time they earned it. So and a lot of that is similar motifs they brought back, or similar choreography segments they brought back, that really, again, was this reuniting of the people, and showing the same choreo piece to describe years past, or showing the same sign of Evita being lifted and her arms up. And then when that payoff at the end, when she's sick and she melts down from that. I got emotional because I just think it's
a tragic scene, that final broadcast.
Yeah. And honestly, that's in the staging and choreo of just adding that extra oomph of what the piece is doing, that I feel with Diana, again, I think you're right, Mac. It's there's volleying a ton of information that's all very interesting. But if they were to have, maybe excised some of the more information time with focus in on maybe less of it, but find a really cool way of weaving it, or
you know what I would have done? Here's a good example of two comparing moments. You have, let's take the Rainbow Tour sequence where Evita's visiting all these countries, but it's told from Juan Perón and his advisor's perspective, where they're commenting on, she's going here, she's doing this. Oh, she got eggs thrown at her in Rome. Well, she got to meet the Pope, so it's okay. Or there's that great line where it's the Admiral, where it's they called me a whore. I can't believe they called me a whore.
Yeah.
Senora Perón, it's an easy mistake. I'm still called an Admiral, even though I've long left the sea long ago. Yeah. Great joke, but once again, it's that whole sequence of she's going on a big journey. By the end, she's getting sick and has to end the tour early. What should have happened in Diana is, once Diana makes the choice of changing her outfits, going from the frumpy kind of attire to then taking on causes and things like that, what should have happened is it's almost like what happened when the book came out, where you have these different snippets of people reacting to them. We should have seen the Queen, Sarah Spencer, the sister, Camilla and Charles, all reacting to Diana, going on this whirlwind costume change, different functions, different charities. Because once again, it's especially because the way they end the show with Charles having that final line, really, you should have more sequences where it's people reacting to what Diana is doing.
I think,
it's the thing of you're snapping back of you're watching her go. Like those two scenes could have been very similar if you had written them differently. Like,
well, it's just like I think they just needed to tap into more theater magic to lift the piece. Like that's what Evita does, right? Is the idea of like choreo and themes. And then we're going to talk about Che in a couple questions, but like all of these little like micro theater mechanisms that aren't just thrown into Evita because we need them. They're purposefully gears that, again, go back to why this piece exists. And like I said, it does recount her life, but I'm never like, oh, wow, I learned so much about that one human being after watching an iteration of Evita. I'm like moved by like, it unpacks, right? Like the power in which one individual can move a mass, the idea of when corruption is at stake, the extents in which humans will go to, the sort of transactional use of yourself to get yourself up in the world. Like there's a lot of like large human pillars that are kind of tackled through this piece. Whereas, and it's almost interesting to like kind of devil's advocate Diana here a little bit of like, Diana's whole life was like paparazzi, right? Like
she was the most photographed woman of her time.
Yeah. And it's 90s. Like, and there is something, I guess, like to the vignette scenes or like this snapshot of here of like, it does make you wonder, like theme wise, like, did Diana ever have a chance to like breathe and actually like speak out what she wants, or like, you know, it's after her death that she has like this legacy that she did touch human beings. But like, it's almost like, you know, you watch a musical, like the musical, like Diana, and they're really, because there isn't this like bring back of things, like every scene is kind of its own thing. Yeah. You're kind of like gasping for breath a bit, right? Of like, you don't know where it's going. You don't know what's going to happen. And then the fact that they really did focus on her like relationship with Charles and like that fallout and everything, like, yeah, it really does kind of minuscule her life versus like Ava seems so much bigger because like all of the rest of the story is kind of like hugging around her, you know?
Yeah. Tim Rice did a very good job with the book where, I mean, and also Lloyd Webber is a master of leitmotif in Evita. Like the amount of times you hear dun 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 dun,
yeah,
like it keeps showing up in very different ways that once again it just keeps hammering certain motifs repeatedly. And I mean, by the end you actually have a whole song called Montage, which is basically a rehash of the entire show, which I don't like as a part of the show. I think it kind of drags the ending out when it's like, just die already. Like your death takes so long, Evita. Like, just get to it. Come on, girl. Like, let's go. But like, that's the thing there where like, I lost my train of thought. Like Diana just didn't have that. Where like the snap clicks. There should have been, just like how in Sweeney Todd, the Ballad of Sweeney Todd keeps coming up repeatedly, almost after every scene. It's the da 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 da. You know, it's picking you up right away. That song Snap Click should have shown up way more.
Well, and they actually could have had like the actors who played those like reporters, paparazzi in that scene. Like, I mean, this might have been cheesy. This is just them like offering a cheesy way of, you know, making things more congruous. They could have had them come in and like snap, like have these like light, like these light things that kind of jar us to the next bit, right? Or have them like come right. What does it mean when there is like, you know, the scene where like Diana is kind of interviewing for the book and like having someone come right in and snap a picture, like the invasiveness of a human space, right? And and again, having like a human actually like walk right into someone's house to do like, there's just things that they could have told a subtextual story to what was going on.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's it. Like there's a lot more depths to what Evita gets into with political unrest, authoritarianism, that's ever so quietly creeps in. Because, Evita at the end of Act 1, it's a new Argentina, and like people get swept up in that. And then, they get into power and, Chase says like, our gold supplies are being depleted. Our cattle supplies are being depleted. One of our biggest trading things are being depleted. Like our newspapers are being shut down. And if you watch the film, they get way more into the political unrest that's counteracting to the Ava Perón story, because they can show that more. But like, there's a whole much more going on there that I just think Diana just didn't have that.
Yeah.
Tim Rice, and Sir Tim Rice, because he is knighted. Like, he is a brilliant writer, and I think I forget who wrote Diana. I apologize.
I have it up on.
But there's something to be said about that British wit.
Music and lyrics by David Bryan and Joe DiPietro, and book is by DiPietro.
Okay. So I think their problem was they just took on way too much. And they were like, okay, well, if we're doing that, we got to get an AIDS scene in there. We got to get, we got to have some type of reconciliation with the Queen at the end. There's so many, when really that didn't happen. It was more, the Queen writes a letter and says, you guys are ending this now because this is spinning way out of control.
Yeah.
And I think they could have just gone more into the royal family. I mean, the fact that there's no Margaret, no Anne, no Philip, like really build up that royal family, because people don't realize, but Princess Margaret was doing AIDS work back in the 80s, well before Diana was, but Diana was the one that got publicized for it.
Yeah.
Because Diana's the one that brought the photographers in.
Yeah.
Princess Margaret was going into all these places and meeting the people and talking to the doctors, but she was way more reserved and quiet. It would have been great to have, again, have Princess Margaret coming to the Queen, where it's like they're both reading the papers in that montage of her doing these things, and it's like, well, what the hell? Like, we've been doing all this, but we're not, shoving it down people's throats. We're staying the path we're doing. And Diana's going, no, you got to get out there more. You got to beat your drum and bring your publicity to these causes that need your attention. And it's that fight of ideology. Like, that's where something you could have had something really cool. But,
well, and even kind of just going back towards like if just showing the different ways in which like Diana interacts with the like common people, like again in contrast to Evita, like I liked like in Evita the moments in which she was talking with people who were lower than her or like more common than her. Like you have that sweet moment where the little girl sings her praises of her. You have right before Another Suitcase, you have that interaction with her and Perron's mistress. But also when she's climbing up, you have the whole like dance tango sort of footloose. Like they just showed like through like a very brilliant way of showing how this is the same person, but like how she's received by certain people and how she reacts to certain people. And that really helped to drive her power. Like her power was there regardless, but it was through the end. Again, these were like tailored conversations. They weren't like big spectacle songs or like, just swathing from one scene to the next. They were like, took time in these interactions so that we could digest who this is. And then when she did have the reactions with anyone else around her, like a Juan or like Che, and the people who were kind of like her or taking her to task or at her level, it helped us honestly, it gave us, we kind of knew who she was already. So it allowed us to kind of get into Che or Juan or like any, whereas with Diana, it did seem like any other character kind of around her was like a revolving door.
Yes. Oh, totally. Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, Good Night and Thank You is a great montage song where, they don't even name the characters. It's just, this guy gets her in the magazine. That guy gets her on the radio. That guy makes her an actress. And then she ends up at the charity event where she meets Perron. It's like, Evita was very, like, once again, reading up on her as much as I can. She was a very kind of cutthroaty person where she used the people she needed to use, but at the same time, it's debated, like, was she as sympathetic to the Peronistas, or did she just realize the political power they had in in basically galvanizing up the unions.
But I think that's something that
majority
that like is brilliant. Like what the musical does is it doesn't really like carve out exactly. It allows you to kind of think. And again, that's just, I think it's just with all the other theatrical mechanisms that are really floating this piece.
Yeah.
So we are kind of dancing around, but we've kind of opened up that, like how, the late Princess Diana remains very much an icon to the public. Talked about is still revered. And I'll say with some people are obsessed with the whole royal family, but especially this Diana legacy. And yet, like when Evita premiered, and even still today, Ava is not necessarily as well known to especially the North American or Western public. Western doesn't meaning like British, European public. So do you think this lack of public knowledge helped Evita's, like the musical success? And again, we've kind of talked about already certain things that the creative team on Diana's side could have done, but like what else could we think that the creative team could have done to work around the public? Yeah.
So what I'll say is not Evita wasn't an unknown property. Like she was a known person, but I don't think they knew her as deeply as they do Diana. So I think what happened there with that meant is they had some flexibility within the show to skip over things, to cherry pick certain events, to tell their particular interpretation of the Evita story. Where, where it's like, they, like, once again, they followed the plot line as best they could in the 70s when they wrote it. Because there aren't books like there are today all about Evita. Like, it's because politically in Argentina at the time, you didn't go in and start talking about Perón. He was kind of out on the outs again. Because he got booted out, then came back and got booted out again. Like, it's a whole thing. So anyway, there's a lot of back and forth with Evita there. And so like there wasn't like copious books being written like there is today analyzing this kind of Diana of her day, basically, with what she got up to. So yeah, they had a lot more latitude with where they could go. Diana had the opposite problem where we know her so well that it's like when I watch and go, well, where's Prince Philip? Prince Philip and Diana had a very close relationship. One of their letters actually just sold at auction for, a stupid amount of money. But like once again, like they were very close because Philip was an outsider like Diana was. They had a common relation. Princess Margaret understood Diana because publicly she was the Diana of her day, where she was highly photographed. People wanted to know everything about her, what she was doing. And, she also had a very tumultuous marriage with Anthony Snowden, I think.
I believe it was Anthony.
I'm pretty sure Tony is who Margaret.
Tony,
or Armstrong, one of the two. Snowden, Armstrong, I forget the last name. Anyway, but like Margaret had a very tumultuous marriage too, and she was the first royal to divorce, which then paved the way for Princess Anne to divorce, and Fergie and Andrew, and Charles and Diana. Like Margaret was kind of the Diana of her day. Like she had a lot to relate to Diana with there, and so when you know more things about her, that's why my parents don't like watching the more recent seasons of The Crown. They go, well, we know this story. We know what's happening. There's not, it's not stimulating to us anymore.
Yeah, right.
And it's kind of like, watching Harry Potter, but you've read the book. So you're like, well, where's Winky the house elf? Or, where's you? Or like, where's this little vignette scene? Or like, well, Ron says that a lot in the book, not Hermione. So it's like, you can nitpick it more, which is why I think, once again, they should have gone. There were like Evita went macro with the big picture, full story. Evita should have gone Diana should have gone micro.
Yeah, agreed.
Where it's like choose a time, choose a certain number of years, and just build it from there.
Yep.
So
I agree.
That's what I think happens there.
Yeah, and I think too, again, just from like a musical perspective, like there is something enticing. Like when Evita came out, first of all, too. It was Andrew Lloyd Webber. Like that's the one thing that this piece has Andrew Lloyd Webber on.
Well, this is a young Lloyd Webber. He wasn't big yet.
But he did have ones prior to this, though, right?
He had done a concert version of Superstar, which was big in its time, but wasn't like huge. Like when Evita came out, that was the big Rice and Webber thing, because they had started with Joseph. They'd done the album of Joseph at schools, and then JC Superstar came along as a concert.
Right.
people were like, oh, okay, yeah, let's stage this. But it wasn't like breaking anything big. Then along comes Evita. And Evita was like, because after Evita, they split and go off and do their own things. Like,
but still,
it wasn't as
kind
big.
of with the humming and, you know, of who Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice are. Like, there definitely was embers of the fire, right?
Yes.
And then to come out with this very epic from like a musicality and, as we talked about, the staging, like that alone. And then, again, like there is something to going into a show where you don't know what you're going to expect. Like there's something you're already sort of putting yourself in like a raw, vulnerable experience to just kind of like be hit with what's going on. And I think you're exactly right. Like with Diana, it's like, we know all these things. So I was actually interested, I'm not going to lie, going into it being like, okay, what is this going to do? Because I was like, right, we're not behind a show, or like we're not behind a camera, right? So we don't have to, this doesn't have to be a biopic. This doesn't have to be a film, you know, verbatim of what. So I'm like, what is the magic of theater going to do with Diana? Right. And then it just was kind of like, I kept waiting to see like, what is gonna, and then I was like, okay, this is kind of just like a staged version of things that we've already digested.
Yes. And I mean, like when Evita came out in the West End, there was no real problems with Evita. When it came over to the States, they had more publicity problems because people basically all they knew about Evita and Juan Perón is they were fascists, which, you know, early 70s, early mid 70s, were just out of the Red Scare communism era. So, and also they were Nazi sympathizers. Those are like the only big things people knew about them. So, I mean, Patty LuPone talks about it in her book where people come in with their arms crossed and like, we're like, prove me wrong. Like, what are you going to show me? Right. You know, they actually had bomb threats called in on the theater. So there's things like that where like they had kind of some knowledge, but it wasn't like what we have with Diana, where it's like, we know so much about Diana that it's so hard to just, once again, separate out and go, okay, what are we telling without feeling like you got to cram everything in off the buffet of Diana's life because people are going to be expecting it.
The thing, like what you just said, like, me coming out of Diana, I'm like, I do feel like all I've watched is like a portrayal of her life. Like I've just like minusculely watched Diana's life unfold on stage. Yeah. Whereas like with like Ava Mac, like I actually didn't know the intricacies of the politics, like beyond the musical. But again, I walk away from that musical, especially from a performer's point of view, like myself, being like, oh my God, like, let's just talk about like the bare bones of the theatricality that's going on, the musical motifs, whatever. But then also I see it, I can look at it from a very political lens and like watch it be a political portrayal of this woman. But I can also see it as like, okay, this is a human being who came from like nothing and climbed her way to the top, made her way to the top. And like, it's heartbreaking to see her fall after all that she's been through. And it's like, again, there's so many different.
It's a very American story that they tapped into there, like the underdog story. And actually, you know who actually is a really big fan of Evita is Donald Trump. He saw the original Broadway production numerous times. Because he liked the story. Like he was like, you know, it's Trump. He's all about, I'm the underdog, you know, I'm fighting for you, the people. And I mean, something we talk about in our Evita episode on Before the Downbeat is, I wonder how much Evita actually inspired Trump, because you have the A New Argentina is very not far off from Make America Great Again. There is something there. And I mean, like, Trump does tap into something that Evita taps into, you know? Like he supports you, for he loves you, he understands you, is one of you. You know, if I take my shirt off, like Perón takes his shirt off to be one of the people. That's very Trumpian. Like Trump does have something. And once again, Americans love that underdog story. And I think that's, Patty LuPone talks about it. Where she goes, they come with their arms crossed. We don't even talk about the Nazis in the musical. There's like, they totally skirt that topic entirely. It's gone. And instead it really becomes this underdog story. And they really sell it as an underdog story where like the first line out of Che after the opening requiem is, "Now Eva Perón had every disadvantage you need if you're gonna succeed. No money, no class, no father, no something. Just basically born in the back of the sticks." You know, like basically like they say it right away, we're like, she is coming from dirt nothing. And you're gonna watch her by the end of Act 1. Or actually beginning of Act 2, because that's when she does her big moment on the balcony. But like with that time period, you're gonna see her go up just like a true American underdog story.
One thing I will say, and this will lead us wonderfully into our next bit, because we've also been dancing around a Che, is I wish Trump had a Che to take him to task like Evita does. So I want to talk about Che because I love
He's a
Che.
Fascinating character.
Because again, this is like someone from, again, a story point of view, he's like a Gower from Pericles. Like it's just, he can just be seen as this sort of narrator person. But what is brilliant and takes him a step beyond is like, yes, he straddled the fourth wall. He's there for us to sort of expand upon all of these like flipped through historical moments and fill in any filler. But also he takes Evita to task. Like in moments,
Eva, one of my favorite songs,
and in also like in moments where she is losing her like humanity, where she is getting wrapped up in the fame and wrapped up in the materialism, he gets in there and he's like, I'm going to question you. I'm going to actually say what's happening politically, because right now it seems like you're very in your own world, you're narcissist, like. It's just like really, I forgot. It wasn't until like I went back and watched the 2012 copy that I was like, I forget how much he is such an emblem. Like he's there for the audience to catch us up to speed, to fill in the gaps. He's there to like color out more historical moments. He's there to represent and fuel the power of the people when the chorus isn't on stage, but also when the chorus is. And moreover, he is there to take Evita to task.
Yes, he is.
And it's again, in this one character, there's so many things you can do with the plot. And it really did help you never have a bias about Ava or never be like, oh, this is who she is. Because then he would come in and pepper something else in or
continually. Even in some of her biggest moments, he's right there to, you know, like during that balcony speech where he's like, you know, like basically he's calling her and then the guards come up to take him away. It's like, well, don't worry, I'll take my shirt off too. Don't worry, I'll play along with you. And they still, you know, take away because Evita and Perón did absolutely silence their critics, and he's there to represent that. And I mean, reading about the way they developed that character is so fascinating because they went back and forth about how they wanted Che to be like because Hal Prince was the one that really advocated for him to become Che Guevara. Because people who may not know the Che Guevara history is he was from Argentina, ends up in Cuba. He his whole thing in Argentina was he tried to get like a bug pesticide approved, but the Perón government turned him down. And that's basically the extent of their relationship. That was it. Meanwhile, Rice and Lloyd Webber wanted more of a Che like we see in the film version with Antonio Banderas, where it is supposed to be just an everyman who just shows up. In one scene, he's a waiter, and one scene he's a protester, and one scene he's the reporter following Ava around. Basically, he's there to be Ava's kind of, you know, Jiminy Cricket, basically.
Yeah. That's good.
Right, and that's what I love the Che character so much, and he's so fascinating. Like when I saw them do it in Stratford with Jillian Kennedy and Josh Young, they actually tracked it where Josh Young comes out at the top of the show dressed as Che Guevara, like in the very classic mustache and the long hair and the kind of the military fatigues. And then he gets into the first scene in Junín and he's back to being like kind of the Antonio Banderas waiter-looking character. And then as the show progresses and as the fascism takes over and Evita gets more and more power, he becomes more like Che Guevara by the end. So they have the same kind of journey with each other, which was a fascinating interpretation of that particular character. But I love Che.
My only thing is, like, I know we have it here. It's like, would it have helped Diana to have kind of like a similar character? And like, I don't think so. Because I feel like the way in which these musicals like were written, again, I think like what we've already chatted about, like something that is helping with the connective tissue, that is sort of linking together certain things, like maybe having the snap click folks more often. Like I just, because again, with Evita is like, it very is like a people's piece. Whereas with a Diana, and I've said this already, it's like an individualist piece. Yeah. So like, I wouldn't even know where to start of like, who would be the day of that. Okay, I'm interested.
Idea, because I thought about this in my dramaturgical brain watching it Saturday on the bus to Stratford, or Shaw. They should have done more with Bruce Dow's butler character, the one that gives her the fuck you dress. Because if you actually read up on who that man is, he was Diana's, like kind of like her head of staff, basically. And he did write a book after her death that kind of got him on the outs with the royal family, because he spoke about working with Diana and like kind of behind the closed doors Diana. And like even her boys don't like that guy because he kind of like spilled the beans. And Diana wasn't about that, you know, but he's like, no, like I told my story. Like she's dead. They're asking me for this. I'm telling my story. But it's like, you could have done so much more with that character, where it's almost like that first meeting of Diana and the Queen. And he's like, and then it's like, oh, okay, well, we're taking you back to the palace, or back to Kensington Palace to kind of be locked up there, basically. They should have way more interactive scenes with each other. And even then, like, he should have had even more scenes where he's just reading the magazines, reading the newspapers, and reacting to his boss and what she's doing, or have him be the one that's couriering the tape recordings to the book publisher.
Sure, yeah.
Commenting on it, because he would have helped with stuff like that, like hiding the tape recorders, helping with that type of thing there. And like, I mean, if you want to have just one person, you could have also had more of her sister be a little bit of that person too. So I think you could have either split that kind of chain role between Sarah and, I forget the butler's name, but the Bruce Dow character. I love Bruce Dow, by the way. So great.
Yeah. I love Bruce Dow.
we do. But like his character could have been expanded. So maybe there are earlier drafts of the show where they did have more of him that ultimately got shaved down to kind of just the fuck you dress moment. But like, I think you could have done more with that character to give another point of view in a way to kind of help, once again, help bridge those moments. Cause he's there the whole time. Like, and they talk about him and Sarah talking with the doctor, talking about Diana's mental health. So it's like, you could have done more with that character and had him around, being more of an commenting.
What would that be like, having that character in particular? Like, what theme or like message would that be? Why would you do that?
Good question.
Right? To me, it seems like
writing wise, I think what he'd be there for is, once again, just like Che is, he is the outside eye into the audience, kind of being the audience or the public's voice on things. Because once again, he's a commoner. He's not there. So like just as Che has that scene before the money keeps rolling in, where he calls out Evita saying, "Look, it's great you're going around the world and all this stuff, but don't forget these people here on the ground that got you here." And she says, "Well, don't worry. That's why I have my foundation." So it's like, you have a few more of those scenes where it's like, she goes to, I forget his name, the butler, and going like, "Oh my God, look what's going on. Like, I'm upset." And he's like, "Well, okay, well, you know, there's this and that." And then like, basically he becomes her sounding board almost, kind of, because, and then it also gives a chance for Diana to have more conversations and more like introspective looks. Because something like her royal chef, dear McGrady, talks about is like, Diana would come and sit on the countertops in the kitchen and have lunch in the kitchen, and so they could talk about the latest shows, the latest soap operas, the everyday things you talk about with your coworker. But she still was the Princess of Wales, you know?
Yeah.
And it's also just to give somebody that way in of, like, especially during the War of the Waleses, when things are really heating up between the interview, the book, the Martin Bashir interview, having someone there to kind of comment and go, okay, this is getting out of control. Like, this is really spinning out Diana. You really got to be careful. Because if you're not going to have there, he's the alternative character who could impart that message to her, going, be careful, Diana. You know, it's just like Macaulay saying, Ava, beware of the city. You know, it's just like, be careful, Diana. Like, the papers are stepping it up on you. They're infringing more and more. This is heating up on you. Like, be careful. This is not going to end well. You know, maybe
Yeah,
you're
I feel
going
like
too far.
you would have to like completely change like what the music, like honestly, even like
Yep.
scenes of that musical. It would be so different. And that's what it goes back to like, I don't even know if the audience would want to see something like that. Right. Because again, like the British family is still placed on like such a silver platter for like good and bad. And like, I think it's almost, again, everything is in the palm of our hands now, right? It's almost pretty obvious, like how overblown some things get with like the royal family media and all stuff. And so like, it's almost, again, it goes back to like, we already know all these things. So like having a character like that kind of just be like warning her or letting us know the other side of it. It's like, yep, yeah, we know all of that. One thing that I'm thinking of too, again, as we keep talking, like the thing I love about Evita and what I'm going to say about Diana too is, and this is a lot of it in the staging, is like there is a massive cast for Evita, but you pretty much are only ever like spotlit on either Evita or Juan or Che or Perron's mistress. And I'll get to her in a second.
Yeah.
And it's like, again, through the staging and through what this musical is doing is like, it's okay with the fact that no one else's story is verbatim, like through their own mouths being told. It is told through Ava's growth. It is told through historical snapshots of Che's speeches. We get another suitcase is the only real like fleshed out civilian song, which is super neat because to me, it's like turning a screw a little bit towards like, oh, maybe someone else is going to get a thing too. But then nope, Evita's going to turn that lamp down as well. Again, it plays into like, what are you actually doing it for, Ava? Whereas in contrast to Diana, I find, and we talked about this earlier of like, we wanted kind of more character backstories or like rounded out characters for this. But I think what also doesn't really hit the mark with that one is the characters are like, they aren't built up. You know what I mean? They're like built up to like almost too much or not enough. They're in this like middle period where it's like, I don't fully know what version of Charles I'm supposed to get in this year. So again, I think that's where like my brain is like server error 404 because I'm like, why are and like even like Camilla's solo song, like there's like enough climb for these supporting characters in Diana, but like climb for them to have songs and have like living in Diana's orb, but like I'm like, why are they kind of like half baked? Do you know what I mean? Whereas like in Diana, like I said, there's only like a handful of them that are fully baked, and the rest they're supposed to just in Evita, there's a handful of them that are fully baked, and the rest they aren't because there's a reason for that. You know what I mean? They are supposed to just represent general people or represent like the aftermath of Evita's power, you know? Yeah. That's my little thoughts on that.
I mean, the mistress is one of those characters where Otto and I both agreed we don't like her as a character. I find Another Suitcase, Another Hall is a very misused song in the stage. I actually like it better in the movie with the way they repurposed that song where it's given to Ava. And basically what happens is in the film, if you haven't seen the film, is Ava follows Magaldi to the city, and as Evita is left waiting in the stairwell, Magaldi goes up to his house, and sure enough, his wife answers the door and closes the door in Ava's face. And now she's left homeless.
Yeah.
So we get a montage of Evita kind of just wandering the city. And at the end, that's when she meets the magazine photographer.
Because you're right. Like,
I can tell it fits more into the story. Versus just a random mistress song where it's like...
Well, because in the musical, like, again, you're thinking, right? It's like the first time you see that Ava is now in a position where she can call her own shots.
Yep.
And it's funny because she's looking at her own self in the face when she picks the mistress out, because she was that woman.
Yep.
That young girl. Yep. And so it's interesting because like in the 2012 version, it's like the staging of it is she's very terse and extremely rude.
Patty's the same way during that scene.
And it's almost like I wonder if there was just a little bit more time and breath of like a subtle realization of like, I was you, right? Mm-hmm. I'm going to go in and still going to like take all of the status that I deserve, that I got me there, but just a little hint of like uneasiness, or like a little hint of like, that's my old life. I can't think of my old life. I need, you know what I mean? Like instead of it just being like, get out there, do that, because there is like sorrow and humanity in Ava, like, you know, in Don't Cry For Me, Argentina. And there's so in the ending, like, so it did seem kind of jolty. It's been a while because I also saw the Stratford one years ago as well, but it's been a while since I'd seen a stage version versus the movie. And so I kind of forgot, that this is a whole new character, Peron's mistress, that sings that song. And again, I think that also, what I just talked about, like that exchange being a little bit different, would have been a bit more of a catalyst for that mistress of like almost like, okay, what am I doing? And then it also kind of infuses into that character of like Evita's younger self, right? Because we don't get in the musical version, like in the stage version, we don't get a young Ava questioning what she's doing or wondering where she's just going. But obviously every human has moments of recollection, moments of reflection. So again, through this a little bit more like human natured response versus the kind of way it's staged where it's like, just get out and blah, blah. I feel like we could have not only again heard this like common woman's story, but also a little bit of Ava's voice, and also just like the voice of women working as mistresses or working in the sex trade. And like if that was like staged today, like I think that piece can have so many layers to it depending on how you want to stage it or where there is that passing of the torch, right?
Another suitcase. It's a very fascinating song where it's like, where did that come from in the show? Because it's so out of left field. I mean, I think that's why they kept it, was because it's such a beautiful song.
Because that's the next one I remember. Like, obviously, like Buenos Aires and stuff is like the catchy, but like Don't Cry For Me, Argentina is in the back of my head, but then Another Suitcase is not far behind.
Yep.
You know?
I mean, it's a great sad song, but for me, I just go, oh, that scene just doesn't work with the mistress having a full song. Works better in the movie where she gets the reprise as she's leaving Juan's house, and it's like, oh, Evita just did what, you know, Magali's wife did to her, where it's like out the door and slam in your face, have a nice life. Which once again shows the coldness of Ava, where she is not willing to give Juan any opportunity to slip away from her. She is cutting him off from all other females. She is controlling him and taking out any rival that is left for her, because she's calculated it and goes, this is my next step, is Juan Perón, and he's got a mistress. She out. She's gone. She's not part of this anymore. I can't have her be in my way. Like, can't distract me. I can't distract him. It's me and nobody else.
So speaking of the gents, let's talk about the partners. So Prince Charles to Diana, Juan Perón to Ava. They're very much supporting parts in their respective musicals. And they both are complex men in their own lives, but they're boiled down to kind of more digestible characters and supportive, in a way, characters to our titular ladies. So why did this kind of work for the character of Juan, but not with Prince Charles?
It's a tricky one, isn't it? I mean,
I think
Jill, do you have thoughts first? Yeah,
I can
first.
jump in, and it's kind of going off with what we just chatted about of like going back to this sort of tiered role system that Evita has going on of like, it's mostly her. Che punctures when he needs to. And then there's Juan, because he's literally like the political emblem crux of the piece. And then the people around him. So I think like, again, the character of Juan is like a certain mechanism for the story, not necessary. It doesn't really, we don't necessarily need to hear his whole history, his whole emotions, because that's not what this character is doing for the overall plot. And so then talking about Prince Charles, I think going back to what I just said of like, every supporting character in Diana the Musical was half-baked. And I mean that being like, they weren't non-existent. They were given a platform and enough meat and potatoes as an individual character, but then they didn't have anywhere else to go from there. So like, that's where I think, I remember watching it being like, I want to see, like, why are we painting Charles the way that he's being painted? Or like, I want to see the different, like, human qualities in all of these characters, like, especially like Charles included. But like, I just didn't know why because they were like villainizing like him.
100%
right?
they villainized Charles.
Well, and it's like, again, I'm like, there wasn't really enough, like, why are they doing that? You know, like, and I think it comes down to like when you cover pieces that have to do with real people's lives, there is a tendency you want to pepper in everyone and anyone. But again, remembering you're doing this as a theatrical production. So you don't necessarily have to stay verbatim to what their lives were, because you're in a theater, you're on stage. Like, that's why like adaptations of things exist the way they do and are sometimes extremely different. And sometimes there is a twist or a twinge to the story that makes you see the story in a different way. And with Diana, I think like it's almost like they were building every other character, and especially like Charles and especially like Camilla, to make us think just enough about like their lives and what if there was a spin-off with them or whatever.
I would love a spin-off.
But like not beyond, you know, like, I don't know. I guess that kind of answers that question.
Yeah, I think why it worked for Juan and not for Charles is Juan gets when you actually think about the show and actually go through the song list, Juan actually gets quite a few numbers to really spell out his story. Where, you know, it starts with the art of the possible, where he's picking off his political rivals and kind of waiting in the wings till, you know, it's his right time to step in and his rivals are kind of out of the way. Then, you know, they talk about him in Perron's latest flame, even though he doesn't sing, but he's there talking about it. Then, you know, you get I'd Be Good For You, which goes right into, you know, A New Argentina, where, you know, Perron gets arrested and gets released. And then, you know, he has the balcony speech of his own to give. And then he's got Rainbow Tour that he has. She's a Diamond, which is kind of where he kind of, once again, doesn't quite understand his position is as precarious as it is, which makes him fascinating. He has the bedside conversation with Ava, and that's kind of it for him. He's done. Well, but there's a whole journey within 8 songs.
But everything you just listed is in support of Ava.
Yes, exactly. Once again, Tim Rice knew he had to write the show. I mean, the only song that's really kind of his own is Art of the Possible, because it's his setup song. Everything else ties back to Ava somehow. Charles, what was needed with Charles is he needed a few more songs with Diana. Because he has a lot of songs with Camilla, and they're great. But, I would have loved a Waltz for Che and Ava, where it's a waltz for Charles and Diana, where it's the two of them, that's what you could have illustrated the War of the Whales is. Where it's
the whole musical could have just been, honestly, like not part one Diana, part one Charles, but like it could have been like their stories running parallel or perpendicular to each other.
Yes.
And have us think about both of them together. Because then you'll also see how separate they were. You know?
Like in that opening scene where Charles meets the Queen and she says, you have to find a partner. Like, it's getting tiresome here, buddy. Like, you're 32. Find someone. Let's go. Like, there should have been a solo song right after that where Charles is left going, God damn, like, I have this woman who I really do love, which is Camilla, which, say what you will about Charles, he really has had one true love of his life, which is Camilla. And, you know, I don't know what goes on behind your closed doors. Maybe they do fight like cats and dogs. They're kind of stuck together now, kind of like Wallace Simpson and King David. King Edward, the whatever, 7th, I think he was. You know, by the end, they didn't get along very much anymore because they got bored living in exile together. You know, but like, who knows what goes on behind Charles and Camilla's closed doors. But the public story is, in 2005, Charles finally got what he wanted, which was he got to marry the woman he truly loved. And they should have had that as a more driving force of Charles is not a bad guy. It's just he's been, just like Diana, he's forced into a situation, like just like the I Will song at the wedding. He should have had a counter duet in there where he's stuck going, oh shit, I'm coming down the aisle. There is no turning back now. We are headed right toward disaster. And even have Camilla in there too, because she's at the wedding. Have a trio song with them. Yeah. Like, they just didn't choose the right way to have Charles and Diana tell their story. Well, and I would say, like, at the end, like, after the divorce happens, just like how in The Crown, after they get divorced, they have that wonderful kitchen scene in The Crown where Diana and Charles sit down and eat eggs together. And of course it kind of blows up and because they're still very much in the pain of the moment with each other. But at the same time, like, apparently, like, according to real historical records, they did cry and hug with each other and actually were very good co-parents to each other after the divorce. Like, there should have been a song there of, I'm sorry it didn't work. I'm sorry I couldn't walk behind you and be the dutiful wife you wanted and needed to be your queen. I'm sorry I couldn't love you because my heart belonged to somebody else. You know, like, one song there would have really, like, they just need to tell the songs differently because they were just so villainous. Where it's like,
funny. What I'm about to say is, like, I kind of wish, like, the Diana musical was an Ordinary Days in a way, where it's like Camilla, Charles, Diana, and then throw in James was her affair,
I would put
right?
James, the
James,
guy,
or like someone else.
Well, she had the heart surgeon who she was very close to.
But just like and again, to me, that's something interesting, right? These are people that are seen as like, they're literally like the actual, in reality, what would be considered like I guess, celebrities, but like superheroes. I was saying, like,
they are celebrities,
right? Yeah. It's like, these are like blown out, like you like the farthest from living an everyday lifestyle. But what does it mean when you put like them in a musical where it's just the four of them and you are just seeing them as humans, and you get rid of all of the like media things and like the, you know, take away all of the like royal dutiness of it and just unearth these
humans. Like, exactly, like, go even further into like they never quite touch on the fact that, like, Charles was an environmentalist before it was cool to do like he had the Princess one, which has done a lot for like inner city youth. Like they really could have gone more into, because Camilla Content was on one of her songs where it's like, listen, you do a lot about architecture things like that, but you don't play the media like Diana does. You got to play the media, and like they should have had more of that if they're really going to play into this rivalry of the War of the Waleses, where it's like once again, like, it's just like they just didn't do the songs the right way. Like as we outlined, in 8 songs of Juan Perón's, you get a very full picture of who he is. I mean, it's a very simplified picture because, I mean, you kind of compare it to how people view Bill and Hillary Clinton, where Bill is kind of the dope in the chair and Hillary's the one behind the scenes puppeteering him. But it's like, no, Bill's actually a very smart guy. He's an Ivy League scholar himself. He's no idiot. And Juan is the same way, where they kind of dumbed him down a bit. But like, he's not. Like, he really was a smart guy who kind of waited in the wings to the perfect moment when he knew he could step in and really take over.
Right.
once again, people don't know Juan Perón like they do Prince Charles.
Right.
So they do have that latitude to kind of really simplify him down to Ava's number 2, and like, Ava's the one that's driving the ship to get them into power and keep them in power. It's not Juan, It kind of really simplifies who he is as a person, but there's that latitude of, do we really know?
Right. But again, it's being like putting it into a musical theatrical production. Yep. You can tailor that story.
Yep.
However you need the plot of the story to work.
Yes.
Whereas this, it's like, okay, what you're doing with Charles in an overtly theatricalized way is you're making him our villain. But I'm like, but then you're not telling us why, or like,
or even like, you're not giving me more to chew on. Make him a great character.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
That yes, he is flawed. Yes, he committed adultery and cheated on his wife. But
yeah, commit to that. Like, if you want that to be, if the whole point of why you want to do this is to show, like, I mean, I'm not necessarily agreeing or disagreeing with this, but like, Prince Charles is a terrible person, and we're going to show that through Diana the musical. At least that's something that it's like,
it's a
okay,
choice.
That's an opinion and a choice that you're putting through the scope of this story. You're making that statement, but
and I think that's the key is Juan and Che are great characters. They're not perfect human beings, and they're not downright villains either. They are, human beings who have their own machinations, their own needs, and they simplified Charles and Camilla down so much that they almost became like Batman villains, where it's like, I chose you, Diana, because you were the right fit for what the Queen was wanting, even though Charles really belongs to me. We're gonna have like a boxing match in the basement with each other. It's like, okay, whoa.
Yeah.
Like, let's actually give these people some nuance, because they deserve that as human beings. They're not simple people.
It goes back to like, politically and societally, the landscape of both stories are so different. Like, Ava, Juan, and Che are the people that we are able to kind of sink our teeth in and get to know more about in that story. They're all hungry for something more, or something that's not theirs, or something that's not them, and they have to fight for it to get it. Diana the musical, that's the British monarchy. They've not had to fight for anything. They are given, like, and I get it. Like, let's humanize him. Let's realize that, yes, these are human beings that have emotions too, but just like the drive of being seen and wanting to be seen and wanting what you want is just like through a very different lens.
It totally is. I mean, that scene on the press line in Wales, right, where Charles gets jealous that Diana's, Diana should be the one walking 2 steps behind, like his dad does for his mom. Diana should be doing the exact same thing with Charles, but Diana doesn't do that. And like, that's a moment right there where it's like, dive into that more, where it's like, give Charles something there where it's like, what's going on there? Like, why does he need that? And like, play into like, Diana's young. She's 19, 20 years old. Like, of course, the minute she gets given some attention and some notoriety, like any, like, child celebrity that we see, they go nuts. I mean, Justin Bieber, right? He got given the notoriety and the fame, and he had a very big downward spiral before he's, kind of start to reform his image. But it's a process, and I got something there. So yeah, I just think they went too simple with Charles compared to Juan, where Juan was still given dimension. Charles was not. Charles was given the most rudimentary kind of basics of, you're the bad guy. You're the cheater. Everybody loves Diana. Diana's going to be our hero.
Yeah. Go. And again, not used necessarily as like a mechanism to the titular character, like Juan kind of is, right?
Yeah.
Because even you said in the past too, like, Juan does have his story, his song that is like his stating who he is. But honestly, we get that to be like, okay, this is a more substantial character we're going to be following. Like, it's a nod to that. But also it's so that we now realize as the viewers that this man compared to like the 7 or 8 different men that Ava's had actually makes
means
because
something.
this character has a song, this guy's sticking around, right? So once again, his song is his, but it plot and story wise is an indicator of this is someone Ava's going to stick with. You know what I mean? So once again, it's like tying back to who we're really supposed to be thinking about. Yeah,
exactly. All right.
So Evita was last revived, as we chatted about, on Broadway in 2012. And so with this recent Broadway production of Diana, and through what we've talked about today, Matt, do we think we could see a revival of Evita in the not too distant future?
Yes. I would say so, because they just did a concert with, what's her name, who voices Moana.
Okay.
I forget that actress's name.
I can look it up while you're talking.
But they just did a concert of that in the West End. And this is the first time since, I think, the 70s, when Evita came out, that there is no Andrew Lloyd Webber show on Broadway since the Phantom's closed. And I'm sure Lloyd Webber is wanting that back.
Ali Cravallo.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. So she just did a concert version of Evita.
I didn't realize that.
In the West End.
That'd be great.
Yeah, very interesting interpretation of that. And so, I think I do think we're ripe for an Evita revival. Because once again, I think also tying into what's been going on with Trump and the rise of authoritarian fascism in the world. And, this is still a story that sells, of the underdog who, comes from nothing and rises up to something. And then is taken far too soon. And then also, I think Evita is like Mama Rose, where women of a certain age want to play Evita because it's a power scene. And, Patti LuPone won her first Tony Award through this performance. This launched Patti LuPone and Elaine Page's career in the West End is doing this role. It's a big sing, which is why it's also very hard. I remember when Elena Rogers did on Broadway in 2012, one of the first things they dinged her on is just she didn't have the same vocals as Patti LuPone and couldn't quite get up to the range that was needed for that performance.
One thing I do love, obviously Patty's acting was probably great, but I loved Elena's acting. To me, I felt like her Ava was almost like a Sondheim Ava, right?
Yes.
Where
the voice from the West
End.
End. Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's almost like, and when I say Sondheim, I mean the voice doesn't necessarily have to be the most polished or pretty. There were some moments where I actually kind of liked the grit in her voice versus the musicality, because I thought it drove more oh my God, this is what she's saying, as opposed to wow, this actor is crushing this song. It had me in it, not to say the others don't do that, but just to kind of, talk about her. I think you could very easily cast someone in this role who obviously you do have to have a powerful voice, but someone.
You really do. It's kind of like Funny Girl, where you need a big singer to do this role.
Yeah, but doesn't necessarily have to be the most beautiful, in my opinion. Because I think, again, that you have wiggle room with this character, kind of her comeuppance and the power hungriness and the where she comes from. You can sort of justify that, justify the way that she sings.
You could, but I would say this role works better, just like a Mama Rose works better when you have a powerhouse singer, because whoever wrote that, if you look at Evita's vocal range, it's all really high up there. And the reason for that is it's meant to be that aggressive, grating, aggressive sound that Evita needs. So Lloyd Webber is just like Shakespeare when you read his text, he writes the rhythm in to tell you where where you're supposed to be going emotionally. Lloyd Webber's done the same thing with his stuff. Evita, Patti LuPone says, it's a tough sing. And the fact that Madonna lowered the keys for the movie ticked her off to no end. But it's he wrote it up there because there is a dramaturgical reason. Right? It's not just for the sound, because it doesn't always sound great. He supports you, or he loves you, understands you.
Yeah.
It's you could lower the key, make that sound a lot prettier, but it's because she's out there like screeching to the people, like getting in their faces, galvanizing them. So I think vocally you do want someone who can really grab you by the cojones and drive you hard. And I think that was missing with Alana Rogers for me. Is just she had a lot of dramatic energy to her, but I'm like, her voice didn't grip me and make the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. And to really sell me on Evita and make me really want to go with her, I want a strong vocalist who is like, it's just like Alphaba and Wicked. You need a really strong vocal Alphaba to really sell.
That is a whole other beast.
It is. It is. Or Galinda's the same way. Galinda's a politician. Yeah. Her vocal range is meant to reflect what she's going through. Like, is she going operatic soprano? Well, there's a reason for that. She's playing into her political voice. Okay, she's going into more her speaking voice. That's more her comedy. She's going into her chest voice because she's going internal during Thank Goodness. Like they do. Like, a good writer will write in
exactly.
Why you're going a certain way. Like, So I do think we're ripe for a revival because it's been over a decade. The show sells. We know it does. And you get a good cast in there who can really hammer it.
Yeah. Well, and I even think, like, when, like, you pose this question, like, I think we do, but I don't even necessarily think because of Diana. Like, I think it's irrespective of that. I think, like, it's just, again, because we talked about this, like, this piece does more than just tell this politically charged individual's life. It, like, allows there to be breathing space for other large trials and tribulations of the human race.
Yeah.
And even just, like, thinking the staging and the choreography, I'm just thinking back in the moments of, they were trying to represent the changing and butting heads of the government by having, like, sort of each individual soldier come up against each other and do, like, this I thought, again, it was beautifully staged, of, like, by doing a dance / fight choreo bit.
Yep.
You are like, okay, this person's opinion is still overriding everyone else. And so, again, like, through these sort of silent, like, big politically charged movement pieces, even that resonates and can resonate with so many, like, so much political unrest that's happening in the world right now. Right. And can, even though, yes, we are seeing it specifically in the story through, like, Argentina's government, but, like, just this idea of two people dressed in government memorabilia having this sort of exchange of nonverbal dialogue and, like, beating each other and winning over each other.
Yep.
Like, it's such a neutral image that can kind of fit and fuel anything that's going on ever.
Absolutely.
But especially in our world right now. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of, like, poignant human race comments and, like, schools of thought that Evita have going on as, like, subtextual things that are, like, floating our main character of Ava, that, like, absolutely in having the show go up today would ring true to anyone watching. Yeah. Because, again, there's so many other things you can take away from this piece.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. I mean, like, I would go back and watch it in a heartbeat. Like, I love the music. Like whoever just did a big symphonic orchestral recording of the Evita score, where it's, like, done in, like, a 5-part symphony. And it's gorgeous. And I listen to it all the time. Like, the music is still there. It's so hummable. All of it. And, it's just a story that, sells. It's the underdog story that keeps coming back, and just the political machinations of one person can change an entire country. And once again, it applies to all countries. A man comes down a gold elevator or escalator, says the right things to the right people, and, what we thought was a done deal, in 2016 wasn't so much the case. Like, we totally went the other way. And, now we're going, like, now we're flip-flopping. Like, it's incredible. And, like, that's the story of Evita. Like, Evita comes in as a whirlwind, gets the British out, sets up all these charitable foundations, reforms education in the country, but at the same time, she, shuts down the press and, does this and that, and it's not great. So it's fascinating. It's a fascinating musical that I just think absolutely 100% after a decade deserves to come back in some way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm. And it's a big show too, which, is great. It employs a lot of people. There's a large Latino population that I think would absolutely have a great opportunity to get on stage and be cast as part of the ensemble or as one of the leads. Yeah. Elena Rogers is Argentinian. Like that was something
I know that. Well, that's also the thing I really loved that too, right? Of like, you're right. Like you can definitely like this to see an entire cast be, because even like Ricky Martin is Puerto Rican. So like,
Latino representation all the way. The only person who I think who wasn't was Michael Civeris, right? As Juan, but like that's fine. I don't mind. It's Michael Civeris. He's great.
But yeah, so hopefully Evita will be on our stages, revived.
Yeah. Jill, I would love to hear you sing some of those solos.
Oh, another suitcase. That's one that like I've kind of forgot how like simple that song. Not simple as in like that's an easy song, but like it is kind of just like a nice lamenting. Like it kind of reminds me of, oh my gosh, why is it blanking now? In Mamma Mia. Oh,
Slipping through my fingers?
No, I literally sang it for the concert series in
Thank You for the Music?
No, it's the
end.
The
winner takes it all?
Finale. It's the finale that
Oh, I have a dream.
I have a dream. There we go. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, so it reminds me of I Have a Dream from Mamma Mia. Yeah, it's just like a nice, sweet little homage to what's happened.
You and Patrick could do a duet of A Waltz for Che and Ava together.
Wow, yeah.
I would pay to listen to that. 100%.
Possible.
Yes. All right, Jill.
All
Where
right.
can we find and follow you, though?
I know, right? Let's wrap that time of the episode. Yeah. So if people want to keep up with us or with me first, you can follow my artist Instagram account at Jillian.Robinson96. Maybe you'll hear some of these covers that
I would
we just
love that,
chatted
Jill.
about. Yeah, and just keep up with whatever I have in my own little artistic life. Mac, where can people follow you?
Follow me at Mackenzie Horner on all social media platforms. If you want some musical antics, head on over to Before the Downbeat. Autumn and I did Evita, as we said, in episode like 4 or 5. So it's a very early episode, but we have a really good conversation about that musical because we both are big fans of it. So it was kind of a great way to like, we did like Superstar and Evita, like, and Cats actually all in one season. We did 3 big Lloyd Webber shows all at once. But Evita's still my favorite one of them all. So yeah, if you want to take a listen to that, head on over to YouTube or like wherever you listen to podcasts and just look up Before the Downbeat Evita. You'll find that episode really quick and easy. I think it's like an hour and a half. It's one of our shorter ones compared to what we do now. We're almost 2 hours. So fun. All right, there we go. But that's it for me.
Yeah.
All right,
so
Jill.
As always, too, with Cup of Hemlock Theatre, if you're watching this on YouTube, give us a like, subscribe, comment down below. And if you're listening to us on your podcast, do all the lovely things there.
5-star review.
Follow our Insta page.
Podcast review.
Yeah. And on that note, let's cheers. Stay safe. Stay well. Keep listening to all of the musical things. And we'll see you all next time.
Don't cry for me, Argentina.